Let me give you the approach I want you to pay attention to here. So when we talk about the Form 8814, this is what I want you to look at. So this is about parents' election to report child's interest and dividends. So what you want to do is you first want to put your first name, last name. You want to put your social security number. And then you have to put on line A, you have to put the child's name. So the first, initial, and last. And the child's social. And here, again, this example is hypothetical, so I'm just giving you some kind of hypothetical information, if you will. So basically, if more than one Form 8814 is attached, you have to check the appropriate box. But in our case, we're only filing one. And part one, let's quickly go to part one so it's clear to everyone what we have to do. So here we are speaking about the child's interest and dividends to report on your return. So on line 1A, we put $2,500. And so on line 2B, we're speaking about the child tax exempt interest. So in our case here, this amounted to $500. And so on line 2A here, you have to put, we put $3,500. And here on line 2B, you have to enter your child's qualified dividends included on line 2A. So out of $3,500, $1,000 was actually qualified dividends. And so on line 3, if you actually follow the instructions, we put $4,000 for our child capital gain distribution. And so when we add everything, when we add line 1A, 2A, and 3, basically everything amounted to $10,000. So you can see it on the screen here. So, when you add everything, so when you add 2,500 to 3,500 to 4,000, we get 10,000. And the base amount here, we put the 2,500. That's what the on line 5 here, the IRS asked us to put 2,500. And so when you subtract actually 2,500 from 10,000, we get 7,500. And for the rest of the calculations, we just follow what the IRS is telling us. So on line 7, they're telling you to divide actually 2B by line 4. So we get 10. We get 0.10. And when you divide line 3 by line 4, you have 0.40. And so when you multiply the two, you have 750. And when you actually multiply again, when you follow instructions for on line 10, you get 3,000. And for line 11, you have 3,750, $3,750. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. You are going to enjoy today's conversation. Moving on here, I want to show you right now on line 12. So line 12 says you have to subtract actually line 11 from line 6. So basically we get 3,750. So line 11 actually is 3,750, and line 6 actually is 7,500. I don't know if you can see that on the screen. So line 11 3,750 and line 6 7,500. So when you do the subtraction here, you have a 3,750. So that's for part 1. What about part 2? So part 2 actually relates to the tax on the first 2,500 of child's interest and dividends. And so the amount that is not taxed here, the IRS wants you to put the 1,250. So we just put that. It's pretty straightforward. Nothing really complicated here. And so when you subtract line 13 from line 14, if the result is 0 or less, you enter 0. So basically, when you subtract 1,250 from 10,000, remember, line 4 was 10,000. If you remember, line 4 is 10,000. And so when you subtract 1,250 from 10,000, you have 8,750. So $8,750. And so on line 15 here, we're speaking about the amount of tax. So the first part does not apply to us. So basically, it's one of those things where we have to see what really applies to us. And so we put yes. So you have to multiply line 14 by 10%. So line 14 actually is 8,750, as you can see on the screen here. And so when you multiply line 14 by 10%, 8,750 by 10%, you have $875. And it's one of those things where, again, you have to follow the instructions here. And so basically, what I want to say here is that the IRS is telling you, if you check the box on the line C above, you want to see the instructions, but this does not apply to us. And that's one of those things where, we just go with the flow. The IRS wants us to actually multiply by 10, and we just have to multiply that. One thing I want to say is that remember that any data that you have here on the Form 8814, you have to transfer that data onto a Form 1040 anyway. So it's one of those things where, if you're filing electronically, things are done automatically in the background. But if you're filing manually, You have to transfer the data yourself. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about the Form 8814. So when we talk about 8814, you need to understand that sometimes when parents have to follow this form, they actually confuse between forms 8615 or 8814. And the thing is that, again, everything revolves around kitty tax. Okay. And so the two rules that follow may affect the tax on the unearned income of certain children. So if the child's interest and dividend income, including capital gain distributions, total less than 11,000, the child's parents may be able to choose to include that income on the parent's return instead of a file a return for the child. And if the child's interest, dividends, and other unearned income total more than $2,300, the child's income is taxed at special tax rates. And so for these rules, the term child includes a legally adopted child and a stepchild. And these rules apply whether or not the child is a dependent. These rules don't apply if neither of the child's parents were living at the end of the year. And one thing I want to say here is that when we talk about 8814, you need to understand that everything has to do with your ability to understand what situation applies to your case. One thing I want to say here is that the everything revolves once again around your ability to substantiate whatever claim you have on the form. It's one of those things where when we talk about Form 8614, for instance, it's one of those things where any data coming from let's say securities transactions or brokerage firms, whatever, you got to have those statements at the ready just in case the IRS want to dig a little deeper. If they ask you questions, then you have to really provide the right answer, and it's one of those things where you have to provide answers either electronically or manually. And one of those things is that you need to have a system that allows you to track all kinds of situations and transactions revolving around, for instance, capital gains. You have ordinary dividends, including capital gains distributions. You have also rents, your royalties. And it's one of those things where you may have to involve your child if he or she is of age. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about Form 8814, and we are trying to really understand what this form is all about. But I want to quickly talk to you about 8615 also, which is kind of related to 8814 before going to 8814. And so Form 8615 actually is an important form, and you actually might have to file it if the child had more than let's say $2,300 of unearned income. And unearned income is kind of similar to a passive income, okay? And I mean, there are some slight differences, but they'll be too long to explain. But for all intents and purposes, unearned income is kind of similar to a passive income. If the child is required to file a tax return, the child is either was under age 18 at the end of the tax year, was age 18 at the end of the tax year and didn't have earned income that was more than half of the child's support, or was a full-time student at least 19 and under age 24 at the end of the tax year and didn't have earned income that was more than half of the child support. So you can see that it's really one of those things where you have to make sure that the rules apply to you, and at least one of the child's parents was alive, because we gotta have proof of life here, and the child doesn't file a joint return for the tax year. So for these rules, the term child includes a legally adopted child and a stepchild, and these rules apply whether or not the child is a dependent. And these rules do not apply if neither of the child's parents were living at the end of the year. So again, going back to what I said, we really the IRS places an important emphasis on proof of life. Okay, now your support includes all amounts spent to provide the child with food, lodging, clothing, education, medical and dental care, recreation, transportation, and similar necessities. And to figure out your child support, count support provided by you, your child, and others. However, a scholarship received by your child is not considered support if your child is a full-time student. So again, it's one of those things where you have to see what situation applies to your case. And so for details, it's better to see publication 501 dependent, standard deduction, and filing information. I mean, this is one of those things where this piece of legislation is really granular, really comprehensive in terms of providing information on Form 8615 and Form 8814. Let's dig a little deeper when it comes to Form 8814. And so basically, it's one of those things where when we talk about parents' election to report child's interest and dividends, it's one of those things where the laws is changing. The laws are changing every single year, and you have to make sure that your child meets the requirements. Because see, there is a correlation between the Form 8615 and 8814. So if your child qualifies for 8615, chances are he or she might qualify also for 8814. So you may be able to elect to include your child's interest and dividend income, including capital gain distributions, on your tax return. If you do, your child won't have to file a return. And so you can make this election only if all the following conditions are met. We are going to put this on the screen so that it's clear for all our viewers. So first of all, your child was under age 19 or under age 24 if a full-time student at the end of the year. So the thing is that you have to be able to prove, to prove actually your child's student eligibility. It can be a student ID, it can be some kind of receipt from the school, the bursar's office that shows that the child was indeed a full-time student or a part-time student. Your child had income only from interest and dividends, including capital gain distributions and Alaska permanent fund dividends. Again, those things, if you have brokerage statements to actually back up your claims, you are good to go. Okay, you got to have some kind of proof though. You can't just say, my child qualifies and blah blah blah. No. The IRS wants you to substantiate everything you say. So the child's gross income was less than $11,000. And the child is required to file a return unless you make this election. The child doesn't file a joint return for the year, so this is one of those things you have to make sure that you qualify. No estimated tax payments was made for the year, and no overpayment from the previous year or from any amended return was applied to the year under your child's name and social security number. No federal income tax was withheld from your child's income under the backup withholding rules. And you are the parents whose return must be used when applying the special tax rules for children. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about the Form 8814. I want to give you some general instructions here. So when we talk about the Form 8814, you need to really understand that the rules are changing all the time, and the main idea for you as a parent is to actually maximize your refund, or at least reduce your tax liabilities, right? And filing Form 8814 allows you to actually reach that goal in terms of how you configure your tax filing situation, whether you are a single filer, whether you are a joint filer, or whether you are a head of household. And so parents who qualify to make the election, you qualify to make this election if you file Form 1040, 1040 SR, or 1040 NR, and any of the following apply. We're going to put this on the screen once again. So you are filing a joint return for the year with the child's other parents, and you and the child's other parents were married to each other but filed separate returns for this year. And basically you had the higher taxable income. You got to have the higher taxable income. And or you are unmarried, treated as unmarried for federal income tax purposes, or separated from the child's other parents by a divorce or separate maintenance decree. The child must have lived with you for most of the year, so you were the custodial parents. If you were the custodial parents and you were remarried, you can make the election on a joint return with your new spouse. But if you and your new spouse do not file a joint return, you qualify to make the election only if you had higher taxable income than your new spouse. So it's one of those things where you have to see what really works for you. And if you and the child's other parents were not married but lived together during the year with the child, you qualify to make the election only if you are the parents with a higher taxable income. You gotta be the parents with the taxable income. I mean, the higher taxable income. Now, higher taxable income means that the IRS will compute all of your sources of income and your W-2s, your Schedule D, your capital gains and losses, and other forms, your 1099 for instance, and basically your AGI for the year has to be taken into account to see whether or not you had the higher taxable income. So higher taxable income is actually based on your higher AGI. Let me give you a bonus here. So when we talk about Form 8814, you really need to understand that there are some situations that apply and some situations that do not apply. And so the thing here is that when we talk about the Form 8814, you have to really understand that the best way for you to really file this form is to file things electronically. I mean, yes, I mean, everything that I'm telling you is based on a manual filing process, but it's just a lot better, especially if you have some kind of complicated returns. It's just a lot better to file electronically because the software in the background will do things automatically on your behalf. Will actually do all the calculations, and you just have to report the data. You have to, and you get your refunds faster too. Okay. And one thing I want to say here is that I want to show you on the screen here, and so the Form 8615. So 8615, as I said before, it's kind of related to Form 8814. So you can see on the screen here, Form 8615. So you have what it looks like. So this is about a tax for certain children who have unearned income. So you have part one, you have part two. So everything is pretty clear. So you have a clear idea what I'm talking about. I just wanted also to show you part three, so you can see again how things look like. So 8615 is kind of related to 8814, as I said. And one thing I want to say here is that it's one of those things where you have to make sure that your child actually meets the requirements, and those requirements change every year. And do not forget, and I'm going to close on this one, do not forget that the rules at the state level may be different or similar to the rules at the federal level. This whole conversation was revolving around the federal rules, but you want to make sure that you actually abide by the rules when it comes to filing taxes with children in your state. And this becomes a little complicated when you have a situation where both parents are not living together, and both parents are not living in the same state either. So it's one of those things where there might be a situation where one parent can claim one child 1 year, and the parents will claim the other child the next year, especially when the non-custodial sorry, let me drink some water here. Thank you. And so basically, if you have a non-custodial parents claiming wanting to claim the child on his or her tax return, then we have a situation where we have to comply not only federally but also at the state level. So this is important to really clarify those things. But long story short, and this is to close to this conversation, if you have any question, let us know in the comment section. We'll certainly get back to you. We'll let us know where you are at, your city and state, and then based on your location, we'll give you the proper documentation that relates to your state and also at the federal level. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Let me quickly give you a recap here. So I spoke to you about the approach into this conversation. I gave you the steps. I give you a bonus, and now I'm doing a recap. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.